Alright guys, today we're here to focus on literacy achievement data. Before we get started, y'all know I love my first grade teachers. It is the hardest grade I think, but it's the most rewarding. Here's a little snippet.
After me. Je,
Ma,
pen. Great. Okay, faster. Je, ma, pen. Je m'appelle.
How many times have we heard kids do that? Act. Bop. Alright, so today the first thing we're going to be looking at is our reading data.
Okay, so repeat after me. Je, ma,
Alright, this is just our reading levels. I looked at when they entered first grade, the first grade 9 weeks, and the second 9 weeks. When they entered first grade, we had 42% below grade level, 7% on, and 51% were above. And in the first 9 weeks, we had 39% below, so it decreased a little bit. And then we had 9% on, so it increased by 2%. And then above was at 52%, so it increased by 1% there. And at the end of second 9 weeks, we had 33% below, 25% on, and 42% above. All right, do y'all notice anything?
You're at 67% on or above at the end of the second 9 weeks, which is higher than others.
I noticed
That's a win.
the above went down a little bit at Christmas, but there's more on.
Yeah.
So it's not
Well,
necessarily
we
negative.
moved at first 9 weeks was level E.
Yeah.
And then by the time we got to the end of second 9 weeks, it was G. That's right.
Yeah. Well, the below went down. Down,
Yes,
down,
it did.
down.
Yes, it did. So, what stands out most to me, the two highest, below and above. Like, we don't have a good number for average students, just maintaining on grade level.
But
So they're either
that's
below or
only-
above.
That's only one level. Below could be all
Yeah.
the levels below. Above's all the levels above.
Yes.
So you're gonna have higher percentages.
All right, so that's first and second 9 weeks. And here's our mid-year benchmark that we did in January. We had 40% below, 12% on, and 48% above on the assessment that we gave. Any concerns about the benchmark compared to your reading levels?
They lined up for the most part.
For the most part, they did. The students that were struggling, we saw that. Some of the students exceeded further than we thought they could, which is good to get that benchmark to see where they're at. All right, now, you each have this paper. What did you notice about the reading data? And what do you wonder about the reading data that we just looked at? This is for you. So at the end, we're going to look at it to come up with a plan. Yeah.
So let me see that one more time.
There's the benchmark.
I mean, that lines up really if you look at like the second 9 weeks is a little bit different, but
And try to be thinking of, some of your strengths and weaknesses and what you think we need to work on or we need training on.
Just what we noticed about guided reading and benchmarking, or what?
Yeah. Well, the reading levels. Okay. Just the reading levels. And when I look at it, I think about the skills that they have to have. the skills that are below and why they're below, skills needed for OWN, and those skills that have got it for the above.
And then like for on and below, what the difference is that pushed them below for this versus where they are for the inner second 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Because it might have been one level that made them now below
Yeah.
versus on.
And we had that long Christmas break this year, and a lot of them went out of the country. For some of them, it didn't affect them at all.
And
But
the
for
reading
those that were
levels-
borderline, like you were just
Yeah.
saying, they kind of slipped back.
And the reading level is kind of more like on the instructional, like after they read it with you versus this is completely
Yeah,
independent.
this is completely independent. You're right. Yeah, look at all that inside.
Cheers,
I'm
guys.
Anybody want to share anything? You think?
That was what mine was, for what I
Okay.
wonder, but.
Miss Katie, you want to share anything?
For the most part, the spring benchmarking was on target, especially for the low and the high students. So I wonder what can we do to help our average
Yeah.
student.
I was thinking that too. To give them that little push to move on up to the above. What about you, Noah?
I was looking at, it's really good that essentially half of our
Oh, yeah.
students are above grade level. But then I'm like, okay, but
almost
40%
half
below is like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's what stood out to me too.
Yeah.
Because we've got a good percentage that are above, but we
Yeah.
also have a good percentage that's below. And that's what I see in
Mhm.
most of the classrooms. We have it like this.
I guess it'd be interesting to see, like, right now, G is on grade level, but how many of those students are in H? Because if they're just in H, I know they're above, but I'm just kind of curious, which I know in my class, I do have a lot that are far beyond the H, but I'm curious how many are just the H.
And two, with the trajectory, H is kind of right now.
You're right.
Because we want them to move on to the I
Mm-hmm.
before March,
Yeah.
so that they have
About
experience in the
because the
J's.
quarter was yesterday. So.
Yeah. So I mean, they should be either in
Yeah.
H or right there at H.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that's something else to think about too. Ms. Wells, you have anything?
The majority of
No, they're
mine, yeah. And I'm just wondering what else I can do to help these children. I don't know if we can necessarily make it to on, but
Closer, yeah.
any progress we can make.
Well, I mean, working in your class, there has been progress.
Yeah.
They've learned skills. I mean, look at Shalia. I mean, that's firsthand right there. She's made a lot of progress this year.
And progress for them is
Yes.
different than what it's supposed to
Yes.
be for the rest of them.
Yeah, you have to look at their progress individually for those students. You don't want to look at, okay, they're nowhere near a J, but that's not what we want to look at. We want to look, okay, where do they start? What can they do now?
Well, that's like in my class just yesterday. One of my lowest students, and I showed Miss Smith. He struggles with writing, and he made all by himself. He created the perfect topic sentence.
Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful. But the ideas he had were beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, the spelling and all, that's not quite there. But he got spacing. I could read it. I knew what he was saying, and the ideas were great. So, hey, that's a big step for him. All right, now we're going to look at our ELA assessments. Okay, this is just the overall standard performance for Unit 5. We're going to go over 5 and 6. The light blue is not mastered and the dark blue is mastered. Now we're going to look at the individual standards so you get a better idea. All right. This is the highest percent of mastered standards. At 84%, compare and contrast the adventures and experiences of characters and stories. So 84% of first grade understood that standard. 82% mastered identifying who is telling the story at various points in the text. Now, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Ours are getting to beyond the text, because they can talk. Boy, can they talk. So, and this is, this is a good explanation of that. We see that in our mastery. 78% mastered, produce and expand complete, simple, and compound sentences. I think this is mostly the punctuation where they had to identify the correct
Which one was
punctuation.
the right one?
And 73% retelling the story, including details and demonstrate understanding.
Mhm.
So that's those that mastered those standards that were assessed on this unit. Now, not all standards were assessed. So I thought that looked good and it matched up to what we'd been talking about. All right, these are the highest percent of not mastered standards. At 93%, I was shocked to see that high percentage distinguish long from short vowel sounds and
Goes along with their struggle with decoding.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
and that's the next one,
That is the
73%.
second one.
Segment spoken single syllable words into their complete sequence of sounds. So yeah, that stood out to me too.
Cause all three of those kind of tie in together.
Yeah, they do. And then isolating and pronouncing initial, medial, and final sounds at 50%. And then this described character setting and major events was 43%. I was surprised to see that one on there.
Do you remember what the question looked like on the short versus long vowel one? I can't remember on Unit 5, but Unit 6, I noticed, and I was wondering, they had to drag the words to the box, and they had
to do that. It was the same way then.
so they had to drag multiple pictures, and I was wondering yesterday when I took
Choose
it.
all the answers. And
Yeah,
if they got them all, did they get it correct?
That's what I was
Did they give a
wondering.
percentage if they
Right.
got one or two?
Yeah.
Because yesterday I was wondering on that.
Well, I was
I would
watching
have to
some
look
of
at the
mine.
test. Some of the tests
I was
do
wondering that
allow
yesterday.
partial credit if
Oh,
it's
okay.
tag on. Some of them do. I have to look at the.
I was
actual
wondering if
test.
they got partial credit.
Cause like some
So-
of them got some of them, but they like would leave one. It's like, oh my gosh.
I wondered that when we were
I
doing
know,
our
too.
assessment.
But that bottom one goes back to like talking about the story at the end. They can't remember those things, but
There's-
whenever,
Yeah, in the text.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is what we were talking about before we even looked at this, because they can talk about beyond the text, but it's within the text is where they go.
just retelling what happened.
The end.
And they miss so many things.
I noticed that a lot. They like to tell you what they just read.
Yeah.
All right, and here we just talked about that.
Yeah.
You can write something down real quick if you want to.
About the test? About
Yes, that unit 5. So you don't forget it if you want to.
I will say I've been hitting that hard in class, long and short, like harder than I've ever hit it in 6 years, like, or 5 years, I guess.
Well, for the
I'm
most part,
trying
I
to hit
feel
it.
like they got the long vowels, but it's the short vowels they just cannot grasp.
I don't think they recognize that it is a vowel sound in the word.
I've just spent way more time on that this year than I normally have because they do get it confused.
Yeah, we do. But when we look at this, I was surprised. This is Unit 6. This is the one we just did on Tuesday.
Well, and whenever they read, now that we've talked so much about long vowel sound, when they're wanting to read these words, some of them that have been such strong readers are now like second guessing themselves, trying to put that long vowel sound in,
And they
and
go,
not thinking about does it
and they look
sound
at you,
right.
does that
And then if
Like,
you
oh,
say
that
flip
doesn't-
the vowel sound, they're like, "What's the other one?" Huh?
sound right? They feel like they feel overwhelmed.
Yeah,
'cause
it's
a little
too
much.
many.
Yeah.
You got this data fast. I said, you got this
Oh,
fast.
that's what I told you. So run around Monday. Make sure you can do it today. All right. So look at this. We went from, was it 40 or 50% not mastered to 96% mastered.
Oh, was that unit 5?
That was, the other one's unit 5, this is
okay.
unit 6, this is the one you just took. This is isolating, pronouncing, initial, medial, and final sounds. 96% mastered. So, that's good.
Which question was that?
The mop.
Yes, just that, but that
Yeah,
was
it
the
only
beginning sound.
initial.
I was about to say, it only asked what did it start
Now, I
with?
do not remember what the other one was on unit 5. The question that,
I don't think it had.
Pin.
was it initial
The
sound?
E versus, no, it was
It was
the
a medial.
pin, and it was the middle sound, but E and I was an option.
Oh. See, unit 5 should have done the beginning sound, and unit
Yeah.
6 would have been better for the medial.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it
thought
shouldn't
gave it
have been E
after
and I.
the picture. No, that's what I was thinking.
I thought that was something they did.
They didn't
But
fix it.
initial should come first.
Right, but on that one,
They shouldn't have
it's
used
two
that
different
as
versions
a,
of pins
yeah.
according to what pin you're
and they
talking
don't
about.
have to know
So
homophones to know the
Yeah.
difference in the two.
Exactly. So that does make sense. 91%. No, the final E in common vowel team conventions for long vowels.
Woohoo, thank goodness.
Yeah. And then 80% identify basic similarities in and differences between two texts. And 73% identifying the main topic and retell key details. So that did come up too.
But that's good though, because they have to listen to us read it one time
yes.
and listen.
And they have to be listening.
Yeah, and then within several minutes after they're answering the question.
Without, yeah. And they're
That was the
interacting.
question about what did the owl and the alligator have in common,
Mhm.
or how were they similar?
Similar, that's the word
Yeah.
they used, similar. Which,
Mhm,
I don't
yeah,
know,
they were describing.
identify the main topic and retell.
It asked them, they liked it.
Was it both eggs?
No.
Was it they
They
both?
both lay eggs.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the owl and the alligator
Yeah.
were eggs. But I noticed some of them picked something about the water.
I had a couple, but
And I
I think
thought,
something else.
I wanted to say,
Even with mine, yeah.
do owls swim?
things.
They both live in the water.
Bye. All right, now the highest percent of not mastered standards. Distinguish long from short vowel sounds. It's still up there again. Produce and expand complete, simple, and compound sentences. That was the question with the punctuation.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not like the way it was worded. It said, choose the correct sentence.
Not choose the right,
Yeah.
the correct punctuation.
It said,
for the
choose the
sentence.
correct sentence.
but the punctuation was only used correctly in one sentence.
Yes.
So that's why.
But
And
there's
all,
6.
all 4 sentences were the exact same, but
Yes.
it was a question,
Mm-hmm.
An exclamation.
and one had exclamation, question mark, period, and one had nothing.
So I could see why that was lower.
But that's how the question will be presented going forward. They will
Yeah.
put them all there together and say choose which one is correct.
But since the one about choose the complete sentence isn't up there, then they must not have gotten that one too bad. Where it was choose the complete sentence, they had
Yeah.
know
Oh, yeah.
that. And it was a question.
Yeah,
versus just
it was
a
probably
sentence.
one of the average scores.
Yeah.
I just picked the lowest
top
and highest.
three,
Yeah.
yeah.
And 35% was describe the connection between two individuals, events, or pieces. So, what do you notice is standing out as the top? Not mastered on unit 5 and 6.
It's this,
Yeah. Short and long vowel
Yeah,
sounds.
it is. Yeah. Distinguishing those short and long vowel sounds in words. And we kind of knew that because we've been talking about it. It's been an issue for quite some time. But I was surprised to see this again in the lowest.
For some reason, I don't know which question that would have been asked. Or,
Do you remember the question for this one?
that one?
Mm-hmm.
For this
What was
test,
the
it
word?
was
That was
mop.
the mock one.
Tell the first.
And they had to
sentence.
pick the end.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean, that one was easy, so I mean, I would have hoped they would have gotten it.
But they missed it on unit 5 because it was medial sound.
Well, and it was also a bad question.
Because it had pen and pen.
Yeah.
So probably what I would have done, and we could still do it, is go back and look at that. And if they chose the E or the I, let's
Yeah,
change
do
it
that.
because both answers are correct.
Yeah, and see if that changes.
I can't remember if it had a picture though. Did it have
But-
a picture
but
of
if
It
you
it?
had a
haven't-
picture of
It
a
did,
pig
but that's a
in the
homophone.
But you haven't taught homophone,
No,
so
did.
you're listening to sounds here. So either one of
And
them
it
would have
did
been
say
correct,
medial sound,
right?
and that would.
So we
have
can
been
go back and look at that, and if we need to check, because either one of them's correct based off the way the question's asked.
But could we even put the beginning sound for Unit 5 and then the medial sound for Unit 6?
Possibly we could ask.
Like swap the questions? Because we know most of them get the beginning sound.
Mhm.
It's the ending and the medial sound is where we're struggling.
Yeah, we could ask.
You can let them anything that you noticed or wondered about. Just right.
Why? I brought all of this just
Look at
strawberry.
all these just.
All of it.
And it matched my outfit.
Those pink things are Lydia's favorite candy.
I picked this out.
You can only get them at Valentine's.
Really?
It's Lindley's favorite.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. It's got a white outside and a pink inside.
It does.
All right, anything you want to share that stood out to you as something we need to look at further?
I mean, I guess I'm sitting here thinking about how it's not necessarily long versus short sounds.
Yeah.
Like long versus short vowels. It's just sounds in general. Like, I know the question's asking, you know, which one is a long vowel,
Yeah.
which one is a short vowel, but it's really, you could really ask them not even just about the vowels.
I
You
mean,
could say
just
which word
read
has
that
a-
word exactly.
Which one has an L blend, and they might pick the R blend. Or like,
Being able to
it's
read
just-
through those words,
Yeah.
I think, is
uh-huh.
some of the underlying issues with those standards. What about you, Miss Wells? You're over here digging deep.
I'm just looking back at there, like,
Give
four
or
lines.
give 3 or 4 words like the
I don't know, because we do it, you know, 2 or
When you
3.
give the words,
I
they
know.
have that long,
So they don't.
that
We
long
do it
vowels
2 or
in there.
3, and I noticed
There's
some
long
of them
vowels.
just like to rush
That's
through,
right.
and they'll just choose the
Yeah.
first
And
option.
some of them aren't even
It's
like
the
pulling
easiest
it
and
out.
fastest. You know, I'm just trying to see how that
I think I would, because then
Like
they have to tell which
school.
vowel it is.
I mean, sometimes. I noticed that too, and that's impulsive behavior right there, I know. That should be right there.
Anything stand out to you, Miss Coogan?
I'm just thinking about the short and long vowels. It's almost like I feel like at the beginning of the year, you know, which we didn't know initially. We only knew, you know,
Yeah.
what we knew. But it's almost like next year,
Yeah.
no matter if they know, you know, all of their letter sounds or not, just
It's
start
something we
fresh.
need to
Yeah.
definitely put more time into. I think so too.
Not
I mean, we
the
did
same
it some
thing
this
about-
year because we knew last year we saw this. But this year it seems to be, you know, standing out more so and lasting longer. Because usually they got a grasp of it and we catch on. But this year, it doesn't look so. Noelle, anything?
I mean, I agree with what she's saying because, you know, at the beginning of the year, we do the phonics review lessons, but they are, like, we just review
Yeah, our
short
only includes a review for
of
the
short
vowels.
vowels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, we focus a lot on the long vowels.
But we don't teach them right off. I mean, we review the short vowels and then we go straight into blends.
Mhm.
And then a little bit later, we start doing the long vowels, which is
Mhm.
we're still doing long vowels.
Mhm. I know we do all the, we do a week
Mhm.
on long A, long O.
Yeah.
But then we hit it, we come, like you said, we do something else, and then
Yeah.
we come back around and we do all the digraphs.
Yeah.
I know, I do keep connecting back to, the other way. I keep reminding them it just looks different now, this time.
And sometimes that's hard for them to understand because it's so abstract.
Well, and then now that we're doing the vowel teams, if they don't understand the short versus long vowel
Yes.
sound to begin with, they're never gonna get the vowel
Like
team
E.
concept. Yeah.
But this year, I will say, like you said, we noticed it last year. So this year we did spend a little bit more time
Yeah, we
on
did.
it, and we got behind.
Mhm.
Now every time we test,
We
like
are.
our test yesterday,
Now we're only a week behind.
yeah, it was long E that we just finished Friday.
Yeah.
And it was on the test Monday, which is fine, but
But according to our percentages, it wasn't too bad. So, I don't know.
did you notice that
That's
the
definitely-
words that they chose weren't really the principles we're doing right now? Did you
Yes.
notice that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the difference between what program we're using and where they pull
Like
the
they
test
use,
questions
like-
from.
It should match
The
the
vowel.
mapping document. It should.
Well, where our spelling words are benchmark literacy.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
have
it
to
was
take the
still
skills on the
it was
Yes.
mapping.
still long
Yes.
E, and it was still like the long vowel, but it was what we did it was the way to make the long vowel that we did in
I
September.
think that goes back to they're not flexible with what they're learning from those spelling principles.
Mhm.
I mean, they know it for the test because
But then
they're
they
memorizing the
Forget-
words,
Yeah.
but they're not learning the principle.
I just told them just listen,
Mhm.
because she did read the word. Just listen to
Yeah,
the sound.
yeah.
And I know you are using the sequence with the benchmark
Yeah.
literacy and stuff, which is fine. But in your small group is when you could, even in the beginning of the year, you could have brought out some more of
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And in some research that I recently had to do, it said that it takes students 2 years to know all the sounds. So that would be between kindergarten and first grade for them to master them all. So that's part of what we have to do as teachers is get them that other half. And then we know that there's some in 2 years they still don't master them.
No, they don't. But we have to follow the benchmark literacy sequence because that's what the unit assessments are going by.
Well, they're going by the mapping document.
Yes, yes.
So,
So I know we spent 4 weeks on reviewing short vowels, but they only spent 2 weeks, so that put us 2 weeks behind.
Well, because the mapping document changed
Wait.
after we taught it, but yeah.
well, in the beginning of the year or recently.
At the
No,
beginning of the
year.
year. At the beginning of the year, it was 4 weeks. And then as we started doing it for 4 weeks, then they reduced it to 2
It was
weeks
like
and
the
started,
end
and we
of
were
the
like,
4 weeks.
what?
But that's now you'll know that you can start putting some of that. Well, you already kind of
Yeah,
putting
I
some
mean-
of that in your reading groups as
Yes.
well to be able to move forward.
And sometimes when you do it in a reading group, it means some more
Yes.
because they're able to apply it and connect it
Yes.
to something they know.
I was about to say, like, well, especially there is that disconnect of them
Mhm.
not connecting yet. Like,
Yes.
they can see it on, if you do it on the whiteboard all together, but I try to when they're reading, oh my gosh, last week we just learned about E and EA, what sound does it make? Just to try to make that
Mhm.
connection
Yeah.
with them.
Because they seem to remember it more when we do connect it to something that they're familiar with or something they know.
And some of the spelling words, they don't know what they mean.
Exactly. Exactly. Like some of them I look at and go, okay.
But you can choose your own spelling words. You don't have to use the ones that are in that book. That book's a resource.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Alrighty. All right, now I want to look at the standards for reading. And we're going to go through each standard and kind of decide, is this an area of weakness or is this an area of strength? Because we kind of want to narrow it down to our area of weakness so that I know what to plan for. We know what to plan for. So our first standard is demonstrate understanding of the organization and basic features of print. First word, capitalization, and punctuation. Do you think that's going to be a strength or is that a weakness?
in my opinion, it is a weakness.
Mhm.
Like the other day, for example, I sorted out did a writing sample, and I know this is, not a multiple choice assessment, but I had 12 that were starting with a capital letter and 11 that were not. So half and half, like,
Definitely the capital letter.
yeah, like, I'm like, guys, it's February. Like, I mean, I've been drilling it, and they're still not applying starting with a capital letter when you start a sentence. I mean,
But can they read it but not use it in their writing?
what now? Oh, this is a reading standard? Yeah. Yeah, now as far as that,
I mean,
Recognize.
I know for
distinguished
ending
features of it.
punctuation.
Maybe
like
that's
we're
something that we can start maybe pointing out in a reading group, if that is an issue when you're reading.
Yeah.
Say, okay, how does this sentence start in reading? The first sentence starts with a capital letter.
But I guess what does it mean? Like, they understand? Like, explain what that means. Like,
Well, sometimes if you tell them to go back and reread that sentence, they'll start back at the top of the page. So they don't recognize it when they're looking for the beginning of
so
that
that's what it
sentence.
means, is that to find
Or
the
you have
beginning
those
of the
kids that are
sentence.
just like blowing through their punctuation.
And they're
They're
not
not
pausing.
ignoring
Yeah.
it. Yes.
The
Okay.
final. See that loud?
Okay, so that
Brody, yes. Yeah.
That's not, I don't feel like that's
No.
strong of a weakness
No,
in
yeah.
reading, but in writing, yes.
Yeah. Now, as far as reading through punctuation and not, like you said, not being able to go back to the beginning of a sentence, I would say in my class, out of 23, I'd say maybe 5.
I think reading through the punctuation is an area of weakness with higher level
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
Because the lower level students are going a little bit slower and
You don't
they're
notice
kind
it
of
as much.
noticing the punctuation a little bit more. Those that are reading a lot faster just zip right through it.
Mhm.
So I think that would definitely be an area of weakness for the higher level
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
When they seem to think to be fluent, you got to read so
Fast.
fast.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, and I kind of tell them that. I'm like, okay, this is not a race.
Yeah.
Then I say, okay, take a breath.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, the next reading standard. Demonstrate understanding of spoken words, syllables, sounds, phonemes. Distinguishing long from short vowel sounds in spoken words. Orally produce single syllable words by blending sounds, consonant blends. Isolate and pronounce initial, medium, final sounds. Segment spoken syllable words into their complete individual sounds. Is that going to be a strength, or do you think that's a weakness? According to our reading levels, according to our ELA assessment.
It's a weakness.
Ms. Watson?
I'm still reading all of them.
I know, it is a lot.
It's a lot in that standard.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. But it's all under phonological awareness.
But it's kind of, I guess I'm thinking way too hard about this. But I'm thinking like whenever you read the word, like she did on the test, someone's reading it for them. So really, they're just listening.
Yeah, to the sounds, yes. Think of their
So
reading. When they're
does
reading,
our test
at your
actually
table.
assess the standard? Does? Okay.
You're just talking about until your lowest areas was them to be able to
Yeah.
distinguish between.
I feel like
Long
we're getting
and short
better
vowel.
with the consonant blends.
yeah,
Um,
for the most part,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
but if
But
somebody-
we
But
feel
if I
like-
get A,
yeah.
you're
Definitely,
yeah.
that's an area of weakness.
Mhm.
But here, I think they're getting an initial, but as far as medial and final, no. So I think they've got part of that, but not the medial and final sounds. And this is the first step
Mhm.
in learning how to decode those
But
words.
I feel like at this point in the year, for them to be on grade level, that's really what they're
Yes.
starting to look through is those
I would
medial
think
and
more
final.
medial, because
Yeah.
usually they actually can get the final before they can
Yeah.
get the beginning. But that medial, which is where the vowel usually
And yeah, and
is.
that's the
Yeah.
hardest
Is-
one.
Because for so long, when they were DEF, they're thinking about meaning, and then they get to that, like, start by saying that first sound and see which word would make sense, and go from there. So I feel like they're now getting to where they have to actually look through
Right.
Yes.
the rest of the word.
And think about too, when they have to be able to do this, what reading level do we
Yeah.
see where they need to be able to look at the first sound, the middle sound, the last sound?
I guess what I'm kind of wondering is like on the test is, I mean, is her reading it actually skewing the data because they have to be able to read the word themselves, right?
Demonstrate understanding of spoken
Like if
words.
she's reading it aloud, they're not
They're
having
not
to read
looking
words.
at it.
Demonstrate and understand.
They're only having to
spoken
listen.
words.
I'm just
That's for the
thinking probably too hard
spelling.
about that.
Well, all those are like spoken, like single syllable words.
Like
So
if-
like,
If like they gave the picture and the
Um,
word and the child had
Well,
to,
actually, in the picture of the mop, she didn't say mop, did she?
mm-mm. I was thinking about the ones where they had to sort it.
Oh, yeah. That was the long, short vowel sounds.
yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a weakness, no matter how it's presented.
And this is something to move from that D to E. They've got to be able to do some of this.
I was
And
about
be
to
more
say, because it's almost like in the lower levels,
Yeah.
they start with the short
This is where we
vowels.
see that in that D, E,
Yeah.
F. Yes. And that's where our data showed most of our students are at, that D, E, F.
Mhm. So it's like with my, with my lower groups, it's almost like now I'm seeing, you know, and I'll do better from this point forward, but it's
We're all
like
learning.
now I know what I need to work, like what they need to know at those lower
Mhm.
levels, you know.
Yeah.
Short vowels are
Yeah.
definitely something that they need to know before moving on.
I agree.
You're seeing that in their reading, they can produce that first sound. When you say get your mouth ready, they can do it. They're lacking the skills to go past that.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Definitely.
Mhm.
Alright, phonics and word recognition, know and apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills and decoding words. Know the spelling sound correspondences for digraphs. Decode regularly spelled one syllable words, like cat. That final E, that was, on our mastered list.
Mm-hmm.
So the final E, they did get that from Unit 5 to Unit 6.
Well, I think they're used to seeing if they're looking for that long vowel sound. They're looking for that like the sneaky magic, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
So that one I feel like they're more familiar with versus the vowel teams and stuff like that.
Which they may not have, or probably won't have vowel teams mastered by the end of first
Yeah.
grade.
No.
That's gonna go on into second grade.
Mm-hmm.
And decoded 2-syllable words. I feel like they're getting the 1-syllable words, but I think some of them are getting stuck at the longer words. They look at it and
Feel
just
the
go, oh, that's a big word.
Uh-huh.
They kind of get scared of it.
I can see them. I can
Yeah.
see it when they're
Definitely.
beside me. I'm like,
Definitely.
Freeze up.
Fluency standard, read with sufficient accuracy and fluency to support comprehension. On grade level text. And using context to confirm and self-correct. Now, I did notice when we did the benchmark that a lot of them did not go back and reread the self-correct. That was a common occurrence that I noticed. Read grade level irregularly spelled words. I think this is an issue again, but if we get the weaknesses that we've talked about with the phonics, then we can start working on the fluency because it will help with the fluency once they can start reading through those words more quickly. And what other factors may be impacting the student performance in reading?
Motivation.
I feel that's very important, that one right there.
attendance.
Attendance is what I was
Like
gonna
I
say.
said,
Yes.
support.
Yeah.
Well, maybe environment. No, I don't know.
Background,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And the skills and knowledge they need to read through the
Yeah.
words is lacking, yes. Support, a lot of them have a lot of support.
Yeah.
I feel like with, me pushing in, you doing a reading group, and then those that are lower have interventions, so they're getting support.
And I feel like they all build on one another, you know, like if you've got a good environment, I guess that's referring to home or whatever, you know.
I mean, I know they're being exposed to literature in all your classrooms. All right, now this is on your other paper that you have. This is what we're gonna be looking at to help plan our next meeting. One, what is an area of need in literacy you see in your classroom? And two, what training would you like to see in order to improve literacy in your classroom?